All right, here's our video today on angiosperms. And simply, angiosperms are flowers. Write that down. We'll use white. So they're flowers. They're flowering plants. Flowers. And all flowering plants, write that down, all flowering plants have, guess what they have? Fruit. All of them do. All flowering plants have fruit. So you may not see them all the time, but they do. Even this rose over here. This rose, you may have heard the song, Every Rose Has a Thorn, which is exactly not true. Most do. Most roses have thorns, but all roses will have hips. We're not talking about hips like in on humans, but we're talking hips. That's the fruit of the rose, the hip. Let me show a hip picture. So this is the fruit of the rose, the hips. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you have not. Many people use them for medicinal purposes. So here's our angiosperms. These are cherry trees, which you can see in April or March. You can go to Washington, D.C. A lot of people flock to Washington to see the cherry trees, but you can see them anywhere on the East Coast. You can see them all over the United States in spring. And we know they will produce cherries. So they have them in this pinkish and this white. Those are angiosperms. And here's our orange tree. Orange trees have flowers also. And by the way, we'll talk about this more, but the fruit of all trees, that's the egg, that's the ovaries, which we'll talk about. And here's a plum tree, has nice flowers too, and of course it will produce plums. So angiosperms, they can go back at least 90 million years or more. They're finding more information on that. So they were around with the dinosaurs. You can imagine a T-Rex smelling the flowers as it was looking for its victims. And of course, a lot of scientists a long time ago thought that the flowering plants, the angiosperms, didn't evolve until after the dinosaurs disappeared around 60 million years ago. But now there's some new evidence to suggest that the angiosperms did exist during the dinosaurs. So, yes, the T Rex may have smelled the roses or smelled the scent anyway. And just to write this down, let's get the pen going here. Why don't I use blue? Why not? I'll use blue for a reason. I'll write it down because if we're looking at bees, we're going to talk about bees soon. Bees love flowers, right? They don't love the flowers per se. They're just trying to get some delicious nectar, right? They're just trying to get that nectar. And bees, by the way, they're attracted more to violet and blue flowers. They're attracted to those more. And even if they have a blue hue to it, they prefer that. Anyway, about the angiosperms, they make about 80% angiosperms of the flowering plants. 80% of the plants. So these flowering plants, they're the largest group. They're the largest group of plants. Largest group of plants. 80% of the plants, 80% of the plant kingdom are angiosperms. And the word angio, sperm, it comes from two words in Greek. One is container, because they contain the pollen and the eggs. And the sperma is the seed. So they contain that, and they get the word angiosperm. So let's look at some parts of the flower. And I guess maybe we'll stick with blue. Why not? So the first part, we'll just go over here, is the stamen. And it has this anther and it has the filament over here. And so the anther, that's where all the pollen is produced. So pollen, which is really the male gametes. This is the male gametes. This is where the pollen is produced. And then we have the filament attached to it. And this is just supporting, it's like a stem, you see it over here. It's supporting the anther where the pollen is produced. And then, of course, the pollen is going to make it into the style over here. Here's the style over here. And eventually that's just the stalk. Part of this three parts here, the stigma, the style, and the ovary, all part of the pistil. But the style over here, it not only is the stalk of the pistil, we see the pollen will eventually make it to the stigma, eventually make it up into the stigma, and that's where the pollen germinates in the stigma. The pollen germinates. It's ready. It germinates, and it's ready for a bee. A little bee coming here. A little bad bee, but well, that's a really bad bee, but it's a new strange bee, right? The bee's coming and it's attracted to the smell of the nectar, and all the pollen will stick to it, and it'll be on its way, and that's how the flower produces, right? So all that pollen gets pushed through the wind and through bees, and so the male gametes can fertilize the female gametes, which are over here, right over here in the ovary. And so the ovary are the eggs, you can think. Think of the eggs, the ovary. All right. So in the pistil, again, we have where the pollen germinates in the stigma. And we have here in the ovary, this is where the eggs are produced, the ovules. I'll write that down over here. Maybe we should change the color. We'll use violet. So in the ovary, the ovules are produced. And so the ovules, you can say, are produced in this system of the pistil, which has the ovary, the stigma, and the style. All right, and again, the ovules in the ovary, they're the fruit. So remember that the ovules are the fruit. Use red. The fruit. The mature fruit, they will turn into those. So these eggs, so to speak, right? The eggs need to be germinated. They need to be, by the pollen, which is the male gametes, and then we have the female gametes, the ovules. Now the sepals, they're just these leaves right here, the leaves on the bottom of the flower, and they also have developing buds in them. Again, this is just the top part of the plant, developing buds, and we know the petal is the flower. Petal is the flower. And these buds, by the way, will turn into other flowers. So this is where in the sepal, you'll see these developing buds. What's not shown in this picture is the nectaries. Usually on the bottom here is where the nectar is produced, where the bees are attracted to. And let's get a picture of a bee. There's our bee all covered with pollen, looking for that delicious nectar. And they're going to take that pollen, the male gametes, and just head out. And the wind will push all that pollen to other flowers. Very important to know about flowers also is that they have both. All angiosperms have male and female organs, sex organs. Very important. So let's write that down. We'll use green. All angiosperms. All angiosperms. You could say they're unisexual. Unisexual. They have both male and female. Male/female sex organs. Very important. Little star there. You can write that. Go back if you need to. And there's two types of angiosperms besides the thousands of varieties out there. But let's just look at the whole plant, right? With the roots, that's basic. You're here on the bottom over here. The roots just absorb the water and the minerals the plant needs. The stem, common sense here, just supporting it. And it's the flowers that help in reproduction, but it's the leaf. The leaves are the ones that perform photosynthesis. Of course, we talked about the fruit before. And so in these two parts, you have the root system and the shoot system. And again, mature ovules, the mature ones are the fruit. So it's just about memorizing now, if you had to memorize these. So if we want to go back to the flower part, just the stem part of it, let me go back there. Again, it's just a matter of memorizing this. Again, the pistil has 3 parts to it. The stamen has 2 parts to it. So the stamen has the anther, which where the pollen is going to be produced. The filament is the stalk. The stigma is where the pollen will germinate. So it's produced in the anther, but it will germinate in the stigma, and that again is the male gametes. Whereas in the ovary, you have the ovules. Those are the eggs that will eventually become fruit. The mature ovules will become fruit, and they're produced in the ovaries. And again, where the male gametes and the female gametes are, it is the pistil. And the petal, of course, is the flower. And the sepal is where the developing buds of new flowers will grow. So it's just a matter of just memorizing that. The last part we'll go over is dicots and monodicots. There are 2 types of angiosperms, and you can see in the picture, you can probably figure out what's the difference. The dicots, di meaning 2, so they have 2 baby leaves, the dicots, whereas the monocot has 1 leaf when it's developing. That's it. And they call these baby leaves cotyledon. Cotyledon. So you want to say it 3 times, cotyledon. So if it has 2 cotyledon, it is a dicot. 2 cotyledon, dicot, and 1 cotyledon, monocot. Simple as that. All right, that's part 1 on plants.